Hey guys, did you know that you should actually ignore all the sleep hygiene advice you'll ever hear? So today we're going to talk about sleep hygiene advice, and actually most of it you should ignore, and we're going to tell you why in this discussion that I'm going to have with Nick, who's a expert on sleep. And what else are you expert on, Nick?
Well, I'm a clinical psychologist, so I work a lot with people with anxiety and then also insomnia. Those are kind of my two specialties.
Nice. I used to struggle a lot with insomnia for a really long time, actually, probably for 6 years of my life between basically after I finished university all the way to working for the first time at a big corporation or smaller corporations. I've always struggled with falling asleep, and it used to take me about 2 hours to fall asleep. So that's pretty bad. That's really, really bad. And thankfully, in the past 2 years, I've been able to get better at this through a set of practices that works for me. And as you said, you should probably ignore all the advice because it really is different for everyone. What's your take on that, Nick?
Yeah, well, first of all, insomnia is a super common issue. I mean, and it seems to be getting more and more common. So you're certainly not alone, and it's something a lot of people really struggle with to varying degrees.
Mm-hmm.
But and while people are becoming more aware of the importance of sleep and trying to avoid insomnia, I think paradoxically we're actually getting worse at sleep in large part because we're so focused on it. And the big idea and the thing I would want everyone to take away from this, the one kind of big bullet point is you can't try to sleep. So there's this concept in clinical approaches to insomnia, which is called sleep effort, which is the idea of trying to sleep, doing things to help yourself fall asleep. Now, in most of life, 99% of our lives, effort and trying hard and focusing and thinking more tends to help. Whether you're writing a paper for school or working on a project for work or trying to improve your relationship, like effort, concentration, analytical thinking, they're all really good things. The problem is they are all by definition arousing. So they put your mind in a higher mental gear, which of course is important for most things. I mean, that, kind of bumping up that mental gear helps in most areas of life. But sleep, by definition, is the opposite of arousal. You can't be aroused and sleepy at the same time. It's a contradiction in terms. It just doesn't work, right? So in order to get to sleep, you actually have to be relaxed. Relaxation is the doorway to sleep. But if you're alert or even aroused, you're not going to get relaxed, which means you're not going to fall asleep. So it brings us to this paradox, which is you can't try hard to fall asleep, because even if the things you're doing theoretically make sense, like making sure there's no light in your room or making sure you're wearing your, kind of like blocking sound by wearing, ear protection, or you're drinking some kind of sleepy time tea or all that kind of stuff. While those may themselves be helpful for sleep, the attitude that they cultivate, which is I need to do, 15 different things in order to fall asleep, it just produces arousal, which inhibits sleep in the first place. So this is why I kind of cheekily say,
things that you actually do to fall asleep, just the fact that you're thinking about them prevents you from actually falling asleep. Wow.
Exactly. And that's the paradox of sleep hygiene. That's why I cheekily say people should stop reading sleep hygiene tips and tricks and stuff on the internet, because the more you try to fall asleep, the less likely you are going to be to actually fall asleep. So that it's a little paradoxical, but hopefully that makes some sense, having explained it like that. So sleep effort is the problem with insomnia. In one way or another, if you have insomnia, you are in some way you're engaging in sleep effort. And the way to work through insomnia or sleep difficulties is to figure out where you're doing that and to find reliable, smart strategies that help you not try so hard to fall asleep.
Like what? What strategies?
Well, so there's a few of them, but it might help if we had some like specific common problems with when it comes to falling asleep, right? So, or to staying asleep, because insomnia is often presented as a problem falling asleep, but you can have insomnia even if you fall asleep really well, which is you wake up a lot in the middle of the night, you worry about falling back to sleep, which
So
is
those two are
actually just as
insomnia, right?
common. Yes, both. Insomnia is just it's difficulty sleeping as well as you would like to. So whether it's falling asleep initially or staying asleep, either of those kind of qualify for sleep difficulties. But you can take the trouble of falling asleep initially. Like you said in the beginning, you often spend an hour or two just
Yeah.
falling asleep, right? So a common problem related to sleep hygiene is that people are constantly tinkering with sleep hygiene strategies, right? So they're really concerned about like the amount of light or like blue light in screens, and like, you know, it needs to be an hour, you know, in between watching TV and then, you know, getting ready for bed. Or they have all these kind of ritual or a certain kind of tea or food that they drink or don't drink, or a certain like meditation that they do, or there's a bajillion and one sleep hygiene tips and tricks and things you're supposed to do to help you fall asleep, right? And while most of those are not bad in themselves, the real problem is people are constantly tweaking them and like changing them up, and they're doing them in different orders, and then they hear about a new one and they add that in, and so they're always thinking about it. So the recommendation I usually give when it comes to falling asleep is pick a routine that seems to make sense to you. So maybe it's you have your sleepy time tea, and then you meditate for a little while, and then you read, and then you get into bed, like whatever. But pick a routine and then you want to adhere to the following principle, which is set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Like once you have a routine, stop trying to tweak it and change it, because that's just leading to more thinking and more arousal. So you want to pick something that seems to work pretty well and then just stick with it. Avoid the temptation to tinker with your sleep hygiene routine.
How much time do you give that routine? So do you try for a week? Because obviously it won't work on day one, right? And that I think that's when people start to tinker, like, oh, it didn't work that one day. I tried and it didn't work. I'm going to try something else. How long do you actually need to decide that, you know what, it's actually really not working and I should do something else?
It's a great question. So everyone's different, obviously, but as a general rule of thumb, when it comes to making changes to your sleep, you want to give things a week to 2 weeks to kind of, that seems to be the timeline on which your kind of sleep system responds to modification and change. So certainly nothing less than a week. So give something at least a week. I usually recommend 2 weeks, especially if you have pretty significant sleep problems. But pick something that sounds reasonable and give it a real go. And as much as possible, try to stop worrying about or thinking about how you might change it, or you just have to really kind of trust it for a little while. And then if it really doesn't work after that time period, you can go back to the drawing board.
Cool. One thing I found was that, when was it? I think it was in January 2017, I decided I would learn to meditate. And meditation for me was potentially the hardest skill that I've learned, that and salsa dancing. And the reason was I just cannot calm my mind. It's a thing that I've never been able to do. And through meditation, I thought that the idea was to completely stop thinking about anything. And that was my thinking, that's what meditation is about, and I just can't do it. And the more I thought about it, obviously, the more I couldn't meditate properly, because I was just constantly thinking about me not being able to not think too much.
Right.
And one thing I realized is that even though I was not trying to fight my insomnia, by practicing meditation and learning to not think, but to calm my mind, actually did help a lot with my insomnia.
Yeah, I think meditation can be great for sleep if it's part of your kind of wind down routine. It can be real. The thing you want to avoid is thinking of it as a tool specifically to make you fall asleep.
Exactly.
It's a thing which, if you do it, it tends to lead to the byproduct or the side effect of relaxing you, which moves you closer to sleep. But if your attitude towards it is, well, I'll do this and then I'll get sleepy, it's going to have that paradoxical effect of arousing you even more because you're trying. sleep effort,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in general, one metaphor I use for sleep is, for a lot of us, our minds are, our minds are like, they're powerful pieces of equipment and machinery. Think of like a jumbo jet, right? They're capable of flying at high speeds, at high altitudes, doing amazing things like transporting hundreds of people across the globe, right? Now, no pilot who's flying a 747 is going to realize that they're directly above their airport and then just nosedive right to the gate, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. You can't do that. If you're going 400 miles an hour at 30,000 feet, you can't just stop and then have everyone get off safely. What planes do is, about an hour or half an hour before they get to their destination, they slowly start to descend, right? And then even once they make contact with the ground, they taxi, they slow down, and they slowly kind of taxi to their gate. So I like the idea of a sleep runway. Sleep is your final destination, but you can't just expect to fall asleep like that. Especially if you're someone who does a lot of problem solving and like is kind of mentally at high energy throughout the day.
Yeah.
You're a jumbo jet. Like, it's going to take you a while to descend and slow down. And so we really just need to be accepting of that and build that into our schedule. Because if you expect that you should just be able to fall asleep as soon as you hit your head hits the pillow, you're going to get frustrated and then anxious, both of which are just going to arouse you even more and make it less likely that you're going to fall asleep. So you really want to create in your evenings a sleep runway. And the defining characteristic of a sleep runway is no effort, no goal-directed activity, whether it's thinking or behavior. You really want to it should be an automatic routine, like the same thing every single night that doesn't involve trying or achieving something. So that's I'm ranting now, but I think that's a really good, that's an important sort of metaphor.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. If a lot of times my wife tries to sneak in some things into my evening routine, and I am very good at saying no, and I feel bad because I do want to do these things with her, and at times I know how it affects my sleep. Some things like just watching TV really late, and that just doesn't work for me. So my routine, I don't think about it in terms of helping me fall asleep. I think about it about just, I want to do this. I want to read before going to bed. I want to do these things, and that's how I actually don't. That's how I actually do fall asleep, because I don't think about it. So I completely agree with you on that.
The less sleep is a goal, the more likely you are to achieve it.
Yeah,
paradoxically, but it really is true.
Yeah, and I think in a previous discussion you and I had, I think it was a few months ago, I think that I asked you, so if I don't fall asleep, if I feel like I'm falling, it takes me a while to fall asleep, should I stay in bed? Should I wake up? Should I do some more reading, some more meditation, some more journaling? How long should I stay in bed until I actually do something about it?
Yeah, so traditionally the rule of thumb is, when you initially get in bed to fall asleep, if you're not asleep within a half an hour, you want to get out of bed until you find yourself sleepy. And importantly, sleepy is different than tired, right? You could finish a marathon and you would be tired, exhausted, but you wouldn't be sleepy. No one falls asleep at the end of a marathon, right? So sleepy is heavy eyelids. You're literally drowsy. You're doing the head nod, like you can't. So if it's been more than about 20 minutes or a half an hour, that often getting out of bed and doing something relaxing until you're sleepy and then getting back into bed is a good idea. Now, if it's the middle of the night, if you wake up the middle of the night and, I don't know, you have to use the restroom and you get back to sleep, usually it's a little shorter. Like if you're not falling back asleep within 10 minutes or so, that can be a cue. It's usually a good idea to get out of bed and do something until you're sleepy. Now, I will say that's mostly a problem for people who worry a lot about their sleep. And that's almost the defining characteristic of insomnia, is you're worried about not sleeping well, which of course makes it less likely that you sleep well, right? So the better kind of rule of thumb is, if you find yourself worrying or frustrated or just thinking about your sleep in bed, that's the thing you always want to avoid. So maybe that means getting out of bed and doing something, because that helps you not think about sleep, and it allows your brain to downshift into relaxation and sleepiness, right? But a lot of people, for a lot of people, it totally works to, read a book on your Kindle or listen to an audiobook in bed.
Yeah.
Anything that
Yeah,
keeps your
I do
mind
that.
off of worry and thinking about sleep is fine, for the most part. So it can mean getting out of bed, and that maybe this is something people probably want to experiment with themselves. Do kind of a week or 2 week experiment and see which one works better for them. But the overarching principle is, if you're worrying or thinking a lot, especially about your sleep, that's when you don't want to be in bed. Because what you're doing is you're conditioning your own mind to think of your bed as a cue for arousal. And that's dangerous, because that's when you get into bed, and then all of a sudden you're like, you were sleepy and now you're wide awake. Well, that's because you've spent a long time thinking and worrying in bed, which is taught, just like Pavlov's dog, you've taught your brain to associate bed with worry, which is the opposite of relaxation and therefore sleep. So you really want to, if that's going on, you really want to break that cycle. And that just means not being in bed if you're worrying. And the way to do that is either get out of bed or do something that prevents your mind from worrying, like reading or listening to an audiobook, or frankly, even watching TV, which is like the cardinal sin of sleep hygiene. It's better to watch TV in bed than to worry in bed.
That's interesting.
So yeah, that's the big principle I think people should walk away from this with, in terms of what to do when you're not sleepy in bed.
Yeah. The biggest cause of worry for me when I was an insomniac was, am I going to get enough sleep? Right. The number of hour thing being very important. People tell you need to sleep 8 to 9 hours as an adult. And this used to really resonate with me. And my wife used to say that I really love my beauty sleep, that I needed my 8 or 9 hours. But the reality was that I was waking up, and the reason that I needed this time was because I was tired when I was waking up. So my thinking process was, I'm not sleeping enough. Should be sleeping more. Should try to sleep more all the time. But one of the experiments that I've done was about these 90-minute cycles that we have, sleep cycles that we have. And what happened for me was that if I was sleeping 8 hours, I would actually wake up in deep sleep, which I was tired. I would snooze. I would keep my bad habits, because I would wake up at a time that was just not really good at all for me. So what I experimented with was, if I knew that these cycles were 90 minutes, and I tried if these were back to back for me, and it turns out they were. So for me, the ideal amount of time to sleep is 6 hours, which is 4 cycles, 7.5 hours, which is 5 cycles, or 9 hours. And so the moment I actually started sleeping 6 hours on most nights, I actually had a lot more energy throughout the day than if I did sleep 8 and waking up in deep sleep and snoozing and all of that. Is that a thing? Am I making that up?
Absolutely. I totally think that's a thing. And the whole idea that everyone needs to get 8 hours of sleep every single night is just a load of crap, frankly. So there's no evidence that that's necessarily normal for everybody has a different need for sleep. Some people do fine on 6, some people do fine on 8. So there's a ton of variability. I'm a 6.5 hour sleeper, which doesn't necessarily contradict what you said about sleep cycles, because 90 minutes is standard, but it could be 100 minutes for some, it could be 80 minutes for others.
Exactly.
But then also the other really important idea with sleep, I think, is that sleep by design is a dynamic system. Your sleep is supposed to flex and adjust based on all sorts of external factors. So for instance, if you're sick, your body's going to sleep more than usual because you need that extra recovery time, right? If you've been really physically active, if you ran a marathon, you should not expect to, if you normally sleep 7 hours, you're going to need more, right? Because you ran a marathon. If you sat in front of your computer all day watching cat videos on YouTube, you shouldn't expect to need the same amount of sleep that you normally do because you haven't done anything, right? So your body is designed to flex and adapt. So it's actually normal, even within the same person, to need different amounts of sleep day to day, night to night. And I think that's actually should be a profoundly like relieving thought to people.
It really is, yeah.
It's normal to have a lot of variation in your sleep. What's abnormal is this idea that everyone on the planet needs exactly 8 hours of sleep every single night. Like that's crazy. Like that's a really good way to get people neurotic and anxious about their sleep, which I think is exactly what's happening. That's why insomnia keeps going up, is because all this like browbeating we do about sleep, it's making people anxious about their sleep, which is causing them to not sleep as well.
So one of the big problems with that is that there's highly influential people like Arianna Huffington, for example, who keeps saying that her best habit in life is to sleep 8 hours, and that gets quoted all the time. And I'm sure I haven't read the full length articles on where she writes about that, but I'm sure it's deeper than just like that. You need 8 hours of sleep. This is the best habit in the world, and people take that literally and stress about it.
Right. Yeah, and it's well intentioned. Sleep is super important, and it's great when you do sleep well. But there is this tricky paradox where if you think too much about it, and if you're too worried about it, you shoot yourself in the foot, right? And so I think that's the subtlety that's often missed in a lot of this stuff you hear about sleep online and in the news and the media.
So people who live a stressful life, they are very stressful for work, for other reasons, and they have a lot of things on their plate that they need to do or want to do. So they stress a lot about getting the right amount of sleep because they know the importance of sleep. Would it actually be more beneficial for them to sleep, instead of trying to sleep less, to actually try to sleep more? So even though it seems like it's the reverse thing you want to do because you need more hours in your day, would you perform better by sleeping 2 extra hours than forcing yourself to wake up 2 hours before and just underperforming?
Yeah, possibly. If you actually are sleep deprived, you're not going to function optimally. It's not particularly dangerous, actually, which is another common misconception. For sleep deprivation to really be dangerous, it has to be less than about 3 or 3.5 hours per night, which is exceedingly rare. In years of treating insomnia, I've never seen anyone that consistently sleeps less than 3 hours per night. So you'll be fine, like you'll be okay, right? But it's not going to be optimal. And yeah, I think for some people, getting an optimal amount of sleep could actually, even if it means less time at work, it could lead to a net improvement in productivity. But you got to be careful with it at the same time. If you treat sleep as too much of a goal, you can end up again shooting yourself in the foot because of sleep effort. So it's a balance, but it's important to know that your body knows how to sleep, man. Like insomnia doesn't mean your sleep system's broken or that there's anything wrong with your body's ability to sleep. It wants to sleep, and it basically knows how much sleep we need on a given night. The trick is to just get out of its way. To stop thinking you need to control sleep, like breathing. Your body's going to do it on its own. You don't need to do anything to breathe. Similarly, like your body's going to sleep, so just get out of the way and you'll be all right. I think that's actually a good kind of take home message for all this.
Yeah. What do you think of? I was looking into alternatives to sleep, and I came across this thing called the Uberman. And there's others, obviously, but the Uberman is basically every 2 hours you sleep for 1 hour or something like that, and you keep that cycle pretty much at all times. So you never actually have a full night of sleep. And is that a sound strategy to some degree, or that's just ridiculous?
I wouldn't recommend it. Some people are interested in this idea of what's called multiphasic sleep, which they think are some people anyway maybe evolved to kind of sleep in more discrete chunks rather than one big kind of unit of 6 to 8 hours. There really isn't compelling case there isn't compelling evidence that actually was the case. It's a very hard thing to prove definitively that that's how people slept. And I haven't seen any evidence in the research that suggests that long term that's an effective strategy. But we do know that the vast majority of people do perfectly well on a typical kind of 6 to 8 hours per night in a
Yeah.
row. So I wouldn't rule it out necessarily, but I'm pretty skeptical. I think is my come down on that.
Yeah, I was intrigued because I love my naps. So I wake up early in the morning and I go to bed relatively kind of late considering the time that I wake up. And I always do a nap in the afternoon because obviously I'm super tired
Right.
because I wake up early, and sometimes I even do a nap in the morning as well. And so that gave me this idea that if I'm already napping twice in a day, would it actually be better for me to break this into cycles where I actually don't even sleep a full length? And I've never experimented with it. I know some people that have, and it turns out that from their experience, what happened, it was only one person. So it's really not like a very broad research, but that person used to have long hair, and he was actually a porn star. And so his look was important. And when he experimented with that, he started losing all his hair, started falling off. Just like, I don't know how the brain and body reacts to that, but that's how it reacted for him. And he didn't make the connection at the time that it was his new sleeping habits. But once he got back to normal habits, it started to grow back. So this is interesting. I don't know what's going on in the brain to make it happen, but it has to be in the brain, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard that before, but that would just strengthen my skepticism of really a fragmented sleep schedule like that.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Yeah. He scared me. I think that's pretty much the reason I haven't done it yet. Yeah, one thing that I'm doing, I started doing maybe a year ago, is that
is what?
So one of the things that I started doing about a year ago is that I schedule things in the morning that I really want to do. So when I wake up in the morning and the alarm goes off, and most of the time, even if it's in deep sleep, I will get out of bed because I really, really want to do the thing. So for me, that's writing. So ever since I started writing first thing in the morning, waking up was a lot easier. So that sense of purpose of I really, really want to do it actually really helped me. So I'm not sure if it's a thing or not, but just thought it might.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think having a consistent wake up time is really important. And what I found is in the long run, the best way to do that is to have those really meaningful, enjoyable activities right off the bat in the morning. Mm-hmm. Nothing else comes close to being a powerful draw to getting you out of bed, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I found for myself for sure. And you said, all right, you've got 2 more minutes. All right, so question from Ajit here. He says, I usually wake up feeling tired. Should I stay in bed and try to sleep more?
Generally speaking, what you want to have a fixed wake up time, no matter how you slept in the evening, and then be more flexible with your go to bed time to really go to bed when you're sleepy, not according to the clock in the evening. But in general, sleeping in is a pretty bad idea for various reasons that are kind of too technical to get into now. But the longer you're awake during the day, the more sleepy you're going to be in the evening. So if you can, really try and get up at your normal wake up time, even if you slept poorly, because that just means if you can stay up till your normal bedtime, you're going to be that much sleepier, which means your body's going to have to work that much harder to sleep that night, which is going to result in higher quality sleep the next night. So it's sort of a bite the bullet in the short term for long-term benefits.
So if you wake up in deep sleep, the suggestion is to still wake up.
If you wake up in deep sleep?
Yeah. It's been happening to me frequently this week, and I don't know what to do.
If you've only slept for 4 or 5 hours, and you wake up, if you can go back to sleep, relatively quickly, then yeah, sure, go for it. But if you're waking up, if you normally sleep 7 hours and you woke up at 6 hours and you're kind of groggy, you're thinking, oh, maybe I should get that extra hour, forget it. Just get up, get going. you'll be fine on 6 hours, but then you'll have built up a higher level of sleep drive the next night, which means you'll get better quality sleep the following night.
Mm-hmm.
But if you sleep in, you're not going to get good quality sleep anyway that morning, and you're still going to be, it's going to take you longer to get sleepy the next night. So it really is best if you're up, half hour for you, hour and a half even before your normal bedtime, your normal wake up time. It's usually best to just get up and get going.
Nice. All right. I know you got to go. So thanks so much for all the tips, the conversation. I knew the things that we talked about because we did talk about earlier a few months back, but still just having this refresh, I think is really good, and some new thinking process that, you got to keep working on this. Like, even though I know about sleep hygiene, I still need to make it work in my brain. So it was a good reminder, and hopefully people watching live and watching the recorded version on YouTube, hopefully you learned something on that. And about that, if you're watching the YouTube version, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And all right, so this was SkillUp Academy, and thanks for joining. Today you learned about what you should think about in terms of sleep hygiene. So basically, don't overthink it. That's the thing. All right, thanks guys, and see you tomorrow.
All right, take care.